On STP, I'm all about having the conversation around lived experience. What's it like to live with a mental illness? And as part of my journey, I tell my story at a organization called MEACT, Mental Illness Education, ACT, Mental Illness Education in Action, if you will. The people that I volunteer with and work with are incredible. And there was one young person that I met, and the bottom line of this story, when I first met them, I always, when I meet anybody, I'm excited to meet any person, anybody that comes into my life. I want to meet them. I want to get to know them. And this young person came into my life, and honestly, I just saw a young, vibrant woman that I thought probably couldn't teach me anything. Probably wasn't going to impact my life in any way, but she constantly surprises me. When we work together, she motivates me. She makes sessions better. She's just a great all-round person, and I've never delved into her story before. So I asked her to come on the podcast, and this is the conversation that we had. You will enjoy it. Yaz is a woman that is, I'm excited to see where she goes in life. She is going to do great things. Let's have a chat, see what happens. Welcome to Shattered the Podcast. STP is the story of my journey from the depths of mental illness to a place where I could live again. It is my absolute joy to welcome to the podcast today somebody that I desperately want to get to know better. She's a colleague. She's somebody that I've worked with in schools. Yaz, g'day, mate. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Mark, how are you?
Good. First off, who are you? Who is Yaz? How would you describe yourself?
I would say that I'm someone who runs a mile a minute doing a million things all at once. But I try to stop every now and then. Love spending time with friends, love helping others. I don't know.
And on that, your whole career, you're building up to be a social worker?
Yeah.
So are you studying at the moment? Is that what's going on in your life?
I'm currently doing placement for my mental health diploma, and I will start my Masters of Social Work as of next week, actually.
And what's the goal with that? Where do you hope to end up with that degree?
Before starting the degree, my end goal is to work in a hospital. I want to work with people who have lived experience of trauma, grief, mental health, loss, all of that stuff.
Okay, so just an easy job for you
Yeah.
to do. So I'd love to understand why it's important for you to do that. And I'm just wondering if you would mind telling us a little bit about your journey with with mental health struggles.
Sure. So I got diagnosed with anxiety in year 11 because I had noticed that it was very situational at the start, but I couldn't stop moving when I was at work. I used to work at KFC. But it was a very stressful environment for me, even though I loved the people and what we were like doing when we were in a team. Um, there were triggers and things that I noticed set me off, and I couldn't stop like shaking my hands or jumping up and down, and I would talk really, really fast, which I tend to do anyway. But when you're trying to talk to customers, it's not very helpful.
Now,
Um,
in year 11, this must have been, was this something that you were concerned about? Was it something that you were thinking, oh, this is a bit weird?
no, not initially. I talked to my friend about it because she had anxiety as well. And she said, Yes, I think you need to go and see a psychologist or go get help. And I went, No, I'm so fine. There's nothing wrong with me. And that was my first response. And I stuck to that really, really hard until I think it must have been end of year 11, early year 12 that I went, Oh, no, this isn't good.
Is it something that other people were noticing as well, or is it something that you brought to the attention of people and said, is this weird? Or is it something that people were coming to you and going, yes, you're acting a bit weird, mate. What's going on?
Um, I think it was something that I brought to the attention of others because when I want to, I can hide how I'm feeling pretty well.
Okay. So you get through year 11, you've spoken to your friend, they've said you might need to get some help.
Mhm,
You've said no. When did you start to overcome that kind of that I guess it's that thing in all of us that, "Oh, I've just got to deal with this stuff."
mhm. I think it was really only middle of year 12 that I really went, "Oh, okay, no, I need help." Because at that point, there was a lot happening in my family. It was Melbourne, it was lockdown. My parents were splitting up, then my grandpa had passed away. Like, everything was happening all at once, that I went, "Oh."
I got to get something's not right here. So you've you've skipped over it a little bit, but let's talk about the lockdown because now it seems like a distant memory. Most of us go, "Oh yeah, I remember when," but most of us were not in Victoria.
Mhm,
My parents were down there, and thankfully they had each other. Um, married 50 years, best friends, all that sort of stuff. But tell us a little bit of what it was like to be there because you suffered the longest lockdown in the world, I understand.
I think so, yeah. I think for me, initially, it felt very surreal because obviously none of us had done a lockdown before. Um, and Victoria started off like any other state, just having a general lockdown, of not allowed to leave your house, blah, blah, blah. But I think for Victoria, because the rules got so strict as well, like we had curfews, you couldn't go further than 5 kilometers from your house, 4 reasons to leave home. And there were people like police on the streets all the time trying to police all of those rules. Um, and I was really fortunate at the time that I was still able to work at KFC because KFC was, um, needed, obviously.
Was an essential.
It was an essential, yeah. Um, so I could still work, which was a really good, like, let off steam for me. Um, but I still needed like a letter from the government to say, "Hey, I'm an essential worker. I'm allowed to leave my home."
It almost seems like science fiction
Yeah,
now
yeah,
when you say it like that. You needed a note from the government to let you go to work.
mhm,
So you've got all this going on. You've got the tragedy of your grandfather, and I mean that's one thing that I don't really talk about much is the power that grief has.
mhm,
We often underestimate how much grief affects us.
yeah,
Um, in fact, it was only pointed out to me fairly recently that when I attempted my own suicide, it was the week that my grandfather died as well, and I wonder how much that grief played into my negative worldview when it wasn't foremost on my mind, but when you think about it as part of that whole time, um, we often underestimate the fact that grief is it's 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 massive. So you're going through that, you're going through your parents
mhm.
splitting up, another devastating thing for any child to go through. You've realized you've got this anxiety, you're in the middle of a lockdown. Where do you go from there? What happened next?
I think for me, I was still in the mindset of, um, "I've gotta get through this. I've just gotta go because it's year 12. I don't have time or the capacity to stop." Um, and so I used study as my not necessarily self-care, but my, like, motivating factor. Like, I would still even though we're in lockdown, I got up every day and I got dressed, and I would study all the things that I needed to study, and then I would go and read a book, or I would go for the walk for the hour that I was allowed to go for a walk for. Like, I really tried to make the most of everything that I did have, um, and tried not to think about anything else because I've always been that person in my family unit that doesn't break, that doesn't crack. Um, and so my dad was obviously having a terrible time with his father and like breaking up with his wife. I tried to stay strong so that it wasn't an extra thing for him to, have to worry about.
So, how did that look for your own mental health? And I know that there was another situation that comes up a little bit further down the story, but did you at this time, like you said, at some stage you were diagnosed? So, did you go see a GP? What did that look like?
I was fortunate that I had a teacher. So I tried to get support externally from my family unit, and I talked to one of my teachers at school. And she was really, really useful and helpful. And she helped me to get my own Medicare card so that I could go see a GP without it coming to the light of my parents because I didn't want to burden them at that point. That was my headspace. Um,
Do you think that that was um, right? Do you think you were right to do that, or do you think, in retrospect, because you sound like most of us who are just like, okay, I need to get this thing done. I'll just do it. I don't want to trouble anybody else. Do you perhaps think that that was the best way at the time for you to have done that?
I think knowing myself back then, that was the only way that I could do it. But in hindsight, with me now, I would say that people are there to help you. And with when I eventually did go and tell dad that I was dealing with all of these things, he was like, "Oh, you should have told me earlier." Um, and same with mum. So I think in retrospect, obviously, they were there to help me and they would have been really helpful. And maybe I would have gotten better support, or it might not have gone, my mental health might not have deteriorated as much as it did.
Now, I'm not doing a good job in this interview because you are quite literally a ray of sunshine. To be around you is a joy, and we've worked together in schools, and you've made that aspect of something that I volunteered to do to be that just much better. I was about to stop doing that, and then I started working with you and with a couple of the other young people that have stepped into YAM. So I just want to make that point because um, you and I, the time that we spend together, we laugh a lot. There's a lot of backwards and forwards. And what I want to ask now is, so you've gone and seen somebody. How hard was it to get a diagnosis? How hard was it when they first told you that, hang on, there is an issue here?
I think at the start, it was when I went to go and see the GP, um, we did one of those tests, the anxiety checklist, and she went, "Oh, yeah, 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 you've got it."
Okay,
Um, and to me, at that moment, I went, "Yeah," because seeing it in front of me and a checklist with, I think we did like a number scale of 1 to 10, um, and it was kind of just like, "Oh, yeah, no, like I can't dispute this anymore.
yeah.
It's real."
And then what was the process from there? Did you go to counseling? Was it medication? What did you have to do?
So I got a mental health care plan, and then I went and organized an appointment at Headspace, um, which I went to the intake for, and then decided, nah, not for me.
Sure.
Because I still thought that I was getting better,
Hmm.
because I was. I used to have panic attacks every day, and they were slowing down, or getting less, not every day anymore. So I was like, oh, I'm getting better. I can still help myself. And I did have a lot of techniques and things in my toolbox, as we say.
Yeah.
Um, but obviously, there are times when you still need that actual support.
What impresses me about you particularly is a lot of people seem to want to use a diagnosis as an excuse for, well, I can't do this because I have this.
Mhm.
Um, in all of my conversations with you, all I've ever seen is a young person who has been able to identify a problem and not have it define them. Um, they identify it, they deal with it, they work on it every day, but it's not limiting.
Yeah, I would say that's very true for me. I like to use my mental health diagnosis as I like to think of it as a superpower. I've reframed it in my brain in that it allows me to be more empathetic and more compassionate to other people and
Hmm.
to actually understand what they're going through. Even if it's obviously not the same story, I think we can all understand each other's feelings. Like we've all felt sad before, right? And we've all felt happy. So I can identify with that because I know what that feels like.
Yeah. I believe I use the analogy of I wouldn't want to go to a dentist that's never had a toothache because I wouldn't understand. So why would I want to go to a therapist that's never lived with depression or anxiety or something? It equates the same to me. You
Yeah.
want a treating professional to have an understanding of an inkling of what you've gone through. Now, so you've come through this. You've made the brave decision to uh, seek a diagnosis. You've started to deal with it. You've got things in your toolbox, and then something terrible happened at the end of your. I believe it was year 12 for you.
Yeah. So just before our year 12 exams, we had been let out of lockdown. So we were actually physically at school, um, which was rare for my year 12. Um, but then one day we all went home. We all were celebrating because it was the end of our official classes. And we wake up the next morning. I get a phone call from my friend saying that my other friend has taken her life. And it was something that none of us expected. She was one of the happiest, most jovial people you'll ever meet. So determined, so stubborn. Um, we just didn't even, it didn't click at all that there could be anything wrong with her or that she was suffering. Um, so yeah, it was shocking. And I think it was something that has defined a lot of our lives.
In your case, do you think it spurred you to go into the social work aspect that you've gone into? Is that part of your motivation?
I would say that it's definitely one of those initial factors. It's what led me to MEACT. It's what led me to a lot of my other works. But I think then having that experience from all of the jobs that I'm lucky enough to do, that's what's kind of pushed me towards social work. It kind of just fell in my lap one day, the idea.
And I don't want to re-traumatize you or anything like that, but having had that phone call myself, that
Mhm,
um, the this person has taken their own life, it's gut wrenching. You know, I
mhm.
mean, it's hard to explain how hard that situation is, how impactful.
Yeah, I remember it so clearly, and I remember my friend saying, um, "Is your like mum around?" I said, "No." She said, "Is your dad around?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Go to him." And I was so confused on the phone because I thought she was in trouble at the start. I was like, "Oh, she needs us to go pick her up. That's why she needs my dad." But I go stood by my dad, and she tells me, and I just crumple. Like I remember physically falling, and dad having to catch me. And I just broke down, and I instantly went like, "I have to go." And I walked out of the house and just kept walking. I was bawling my eyes down. It was a main street. It felt kind of, I laugh at it now because it's kind of, if I had seen someone like that, I'd almost laugh. It felt very movie. Like it was, I was crying walking down a main street. Everyone was staring at me, but I had my headphones on and I was tunnel visioned. Um, and I remember going to my friend's house because she lives like a 40-minute walk from me. And just, yeah, it's a day I'll never forget for sure.
Yeah, I can't believe that they had the wherewithal to tell you to go to your father to hear
I
the
was
news.
very impressed.
That's remarkable that they had the presence of mind to do that.
Yeah.
How do you think it affected your mental health, or did it affect your mental health?
I think in that state, by the end of year 12, with everything else, I was almost numb. Like I didn't really have feeling, I guess. I was just a constant state of almost so much anxiety that I felt numb, that I couldn't tap into those feelings. Um, so to me, I rationalized it straight away. Um, I went, she's in a better place because, if she was suffering, now she's free from her demons. Um,
Yeah.
and I just rationalized it that way. So I think it definitely did impact my mental health, but not in a obvious way. Like to the outside world, apart from that initial day, I seemed fine.
Mate, thank you so much for your courage in sharing that. I've been in that situation. it's yeah. There's no words for it. There's
No.
so now, uh, in your current life, you've moved away from home, your home city. You've shown up in this city that I don't know if you even have family here. You've just come up to study. Um, so how has that been? Especially with you mentioned some of the work that you do with MEACT, which is Mental Illness Education ACT. It's the organisation I work with. Um, you do a bunch of other stuff. How has that all come together? I mean, you if I was to meet you without knowing any of your story, I would assume that you're just a person that's just a perpetual go-getter that's never had a stumble in their life, but you do all these incredible things. Well, how has that process worked out, particularly for somebody that has such a great excuse of, well, I live with anxiety, so I don't have to be as strong as somebody else. How has that played out for you?
Um, I think it's all just again, it kind of all just came to me. I'm someone that as soon as I get an idea in my head, I have to go and do it. And I think that was the case with a lot of my things. I wanted to volunteer, and so when I came to Canberra, the first thing I did was start to volunteer. And I started to volunteer with Ronald McDonald, um, which is an organisation that helps sick kids in hospitals. Um, and I've loved that, and from there, I started to work from them because they got to know me. And it's the same with MEACT. I started as a volunteer because I wanted to tell my lived experience. I wanted to help other people. And I think also the more you talk about it, the more you help yourself in a way as well. And from there, I moved on as well. And I don't know, I think it all sort of just came to me. And I'm really lucky that these places now are also my support systems um, because they all have really good communities that I feel safe in and that I feel comfortable with everyone there. I think it's a really cool environment.
So we go into schools together.
Mhm.
We do a program called YAM, Youth Aware of Mental Illness, and it's. I mean, I guess it's this sort of thing that it's just it's powerful in that it opens up the discussion, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How has telling your lived experience as part of that, and you as an instructor, your job is to deliver the program, and I've seen you do it. You do that very, very well. But um, I'm a lived experience person, so I just come in and kind of tell my lived experience. And I've heard a little bit of your story. How has that affected you, being able to tell parts of your story?
Um, I think it can be really powerful, especially as we know some of our groups are so difficult to try and manage or to get them to listen or do anything. Um, but the thing about whenever you or I tell a story is that straight away you have the attention of everyone in the room because they go, "Oh, no, this is real. This person isn't just a robot that's come in here to be like, everything's fine. You're doing great. You can get help. This person actually knows what it's like." Um, and I think that that's really important because it's allowed me to help other people. At least I hope so. Um, because I know that if someone came into my school when I was in high school and tried to preach all the things that we preach without telling stories, I'd be like, yeah, nah, this person doesn't get it. Um,
So, I mean, that's an interesting thing. So, the story part of it for you is one of the more powerful tools in your arsenal.
yeah.
It's funny because I guess you more often hear me tell my story than I get to hear your story. But what is the reaction of the kids when we start to tell those stories? You said that we get all their attention. Why do you think that is? What do you think's going on in their minds when we're telling our stories?
I think they're starting to humanize us, and I also think that they're pulling apart our story into little bits they identify with or that they can understand or, you know, is interesting to them. And through that, it gives them the ability as well to add things to their toolkit and to be like, oh, I'm not alone in this. There is someone else out there who has been through it. Because you, of course, don't really know that in schools. Um, you
No,
feel,
I mean, I asked that question because I often walk out of having told my story and I'm so wrapped up in just delivering it that I don't really see the reaction of the kids. You kind of you know that they're looking at you, but you kind of thinking, well, do they go out into the playground and start playing handball and forget all about you? But I know that in when you've told your stories, when kids have come up to me afterwards and they've mentioned, oh, when Yaz said this, um, you know that it's getting through, yeah?
yeah. And I think that's really special.
So talk to me about this toolbox thing. You mentioned it once or twice before. So a toolbox, it sounds like an odd thing to have in a mental health situation. Clearly, you're not talking about a metal toolbox with hammers. What are you talking about with that?
More like self-care strategies or things that I do that make me feel good or that can help me de-escalate if I'm feeling really wound up and really stressed. And
So so you walk into a school, you're feeling really stressed. School kids are always fun, even at the best of times. What are some of the tools? What are some of the things that you might do if you're feeling a little bit anxious in yourself? What do you do?
one of the biggest things I think for me is talking to people. And a lot of our colleagues are really great with that because a lot of them need the same thing. And even the general, how you going? What are you up to? How's your weekend? Can help you to take your mind off what you're about to do with delivering a session. And I think that's one of my biggest strategies. But also, sometimes just taking a moment to just be myself for literally a second and to just take a breath and like sigh it all out can be really good, especially if I'm feeling really jittery.
Well, the thing of it is that I mean, we say it in the classrooms all the time. Look at me. Would you believe that I've been through this? And you're one of those people that even I know your story, but when I meet you, you're so composed and so self-aware, which is so unusual for somebody so young that it inspires me. I think, well, you know, and especially after hearing all of your story today. So I want to just finish because it's important for me to ask you if you had some advice for somebody out there that is a young person that is struggling, what would that advice be?
I think my advice is the same as what I would say in a lot of our school groups is that you were never alone in whatever you are going through. And even if you think you are, I can promise you that you're not. Um, I know for me, when I thought that I was alone, it wasn't until I talked to one person that I felt the courage to talk to another person and go, oh, hey, I have a support system. And I know that it's harder for some people, but there always is somewhere out there, and it isn't weak to speak. It's actually one of the bravest things that you can do. That if you're not feeling well, talk to someone, talk to anyone that you feel comfortable with, that you feel safe with. And if they don't help, try again because there is someone out there.
I'm going to leave it right there. I can't I can't finish it off any better than that. So, Yaz, I'm just going to say, mate, thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Shattered the Podcast. I'm Mark. Special thanks to my producer, Meredith Brosnan, and also to Torian, Kevin, and Lorraine. And we can't forget the amazing band Adelaide who let us use their song as our theme For more information, check us out on all your socials. STP Shattered the Podcast.